Hi, my name is Vladislav Spirkov, and this is my Databricks tutorial. So, first thing I'm going to talk about is like what is Databricks in the first place before we start even trying to use it. So, firstly, Databricks was founded in 2013 by the people who created Apache Spark. It is a web-based application to host Apache Spark on basically on your computer on the cloud, so you don't have to download anything locally or handle anything locally. With it being on the cloud, everything is stored on the cloud, therefore being accessible by like a lot of people, whoever you need it to be, really quickly, really easily. Also, there's these ideas of clusters that you create with a lot of workbooks inside of them, and you can scale and share them really rapidly across the cloud. And there's an automation part of Databricks that has automatic clustering management. And basically the whole point of Databricks is all you have to do is write your scripts. That's like the main idea, so to speak. But what is Apache Spark? We talked about Databricks, but what is Apache Spark? So Apache Spark is an open source distributed processing system for big data workloads. What that means is open source, it is community available, it's updated by the community, and it's basically a system that processes huge data sets really efficiently and in an optimized fashion. It utilizes in-memory caching as opposed to reading and writing and saving from into a disk. It supports Python, Scala, R, and Java languages. And there's this idea of a data parallelism where you're able to run two things at the same time or multiple things at the same time, which is also like parallel processing, which allows for faster executions. Now we're going to talk about, how Databricks really works and things you can do on a really basic level. So we're going to talk about how to create a new cluster, how to create new workbooks, how to import data, and then how to start working on that data, how to process and plot it, and sort of start looking at it. So I'm going to go over here to just going to stop that. And there you go. So I have my Databricks account here. Sorry, it's already filled up, but just pretend there's like nothing here. I have my Databricks account that I made. I have a couple of workbooks in there. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is how to create a cluster. So everything to create anything, it's obviously the create button. You go to cluster, you name it, and then you use the default runtime that's already in here. For us, we're really basic, so we're just going to use default because it's going to run the best. If you have more advanced sort of, knowledge and requirements for whatever you're doing, you can pick different ones, obviously. So I have the community edition, meaning I could only have one cluster, so I already have a cluster, but you just put in a name, create the cluster. It takes a while for it to create, and then you have your cluster. And then the next thing is how to create a workbook. Same thing, create button and then notebook. You name it, you pick your language. So you're gonna have test 3 because I've already had a couple of other tests, as you can see. And I'm gonna pick Python because that's what I know. And obviously I'm gonna have it to the yes cluster, which is the cluster I've made earlier. Then we can create it. And now we have our test 3 workbook. It's a part of the yes cluster. If it wasn't a part of that cluster, it would have said detached cluster or something like that, or unassigned cluster. So you just have to attach to a certain cluster for it to run any of the code inside of it. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is how could we import data? So you can click the data button, and I have a couple things. Let's just disregard these for now, and then you can create table. When you're creating a table, like you click this button and create table, and you start looking through your files. There's sort of two things you can do, right? So I have a data set called braintumor.csv. It's just on brain tumor, parameters and different things like that. So right now, Brain Tumor has been uploaded. It is in Databricks as a CSV file, and it's in the system, basically. And I'm just going to take this and save this to my clipboard. Let me just make sure that I did that. Yep. Create table with you, whatever, I got the main one. But after this, so it's saved, the CSV file is saved in Databricks. The next thing you can do is continue clicking these buttons, and you can create a table, and we'll select our cluster, preview table, and here we have our table. Our first row is the header, and now we have a table. We can create this table number. We have brain tumor 2 CSV table. Basically what a table is like a saved data frame within Databricks. So it's not its own CSV file, it's like its own entity that's saved within Databricks. It's like a table. It's not a CSV file, it's a table. And you can either read and manipulate table, or read and manipulate the data set. So this is our table. So we're going to go back to workspace and test 3, which is what we were working on, and we're going to start by reading the data. So the first thing we can do is start path. This is Python, right? And we can get that path that we sort of saved. So I also copied a little bit extra to the clipboard, but this is essentially what the main thing is. Basically in Databricks it has to be file store, tables, and then brain tumor or file name.csv. And then we're going to have a df called data frame, and it's going to be a lot of the methods and functions used within Databricks is obviously using Apache Spark, so it will just be Spark dot method dot whatever. A lot of the times it starts with Spark. So we'll do spark.read CSV. The path is the path. And we have a header in there, so we're going to have to add header equals true. And then we can just df.show, and yeah, we'll run that by pressing Shift Enter. So here it read our database or our CSV file or data set, and .show shows the first 20, I'm pretty sure, or the first 10 rows. But you can see it's a really sort of unorganized fashion, not really pretty to look at. We could also have df.head 10. So this is the first 10 rows, again, really dirty looking. And then also, just like in Python, there is df.tail 10. This is the last 10 rows, also very dirty, hard to look at. So what Databricks has, it's very interesting and nice looking, is their display function, which if you click display in the data frame, you'll see that there's a nice user interface to look at this data frame. And there's a lot more you can do with this than just look at the data frame like this. And I'll get into that in just a second. So here's where you have display and we're looking at the data frame. What type of like manipulation tactics, or how can you change the data? Like what can you do in that sense? So we're going to talk about that. So to select a singular column and change anything, we have a column in here called mean. So we can just take df.mean, and we've selected that column. And now we can manipulate, change anything within that column. To add a column, for example, say we want to round everything, we can have df, which is our original, so we take the df or data set with column, the name of the column that we want to add. So we'll add rounded mean, and then what do we want the column to be? So we want the column to be round df dot mean. We want to round everything in there. Let's run it. It doesn't define the round method. All right, well, let's just say we wanted like another mean column. Let's just say, for an example, mean 2, we want it to just be another mean column. So there it is. To save it to our data set, we actually have to, this is just an execution, but to save it, we need to do df is equal to df with the column. And if we display the df now, the data frame, we'll see if we go all the way to the right, then we have that mean2 column. There it is. Now what you can do is sort of, you can filter the rows or the columns in the data frame. So if we use df.filter, and we can take the column mean, df.mean, and see if the column is greater than, I don't know, 5, for example. And then we click .show, and we applied this filter. Let's take a look. And now again, it shows us like this really unorganized looking output, so we can always use display on these functions just so it shows us in a nice looking data frame. So all the means are above 5, right? And it shows all the data with means above 5, which is really neat. You can filter by pretty much anything, multiple different things, but I don't have time to get into all that. The final thing you can do in terms of like data and processing that I'm going to get into is grouping. So what you can do is you can take your data frame and group by let's just take df.class group by, it should be like this. We'll take the column class and dot count how many of each how many entities are in each class. There you go. So of class 0 there's this many, and of class 1 there's that many. What the classes actually represents in the documentation of the data set, I'm not too sure, but that's just what you can do. You can group by certain classes. This data is really numeric based, so we can't really group by any type of we can bin the data and then group by, but there's no continents or anything. So this is just a quick example of how to group by. But now the final thing I wanted to talk about is what exactly you can do with this display. The functionality of this display that Databricks offers. So the first thing you can do is look at it, obviously, the data frame, look up and down, sort it by greatest to smallest in any column. And then the next thing you can do is you can actually graph a lot of things. So for example, let's say we want to graph the class against the mean. Class against the mean. So and then we can, instead of sum, we click average, and here we see the average means, or the average size of, I guess, a tumor, this brain tumor we're talking about, in class 0 cases versus class 1 cases, right? And you could do anything, and you can group by a lot of different things, and tons of different visualization options, and it's just incredible what you can do just with the display of Databricks. And you can download all this, and yeah. So it's very similar to pandas in Python. The display function pretty much just takes out all the use for ggplot or any type of pyplot, any type of plotting software or libraries required in Python. Pandas is very similarly, as you can see, the group by, the rows, how you select filtering and stuff like that, very similar to pandas. And it's very easy to use if you're a decent pandas Python programmer. Very easy to get into. And yeah, that's just my basic tutorial on Databricks and how to use Apache Spark within Databricks. Thank you.